G'day, Craig. Good to see you, mate.
Good to see you too, Martin.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Cut the Crap, where we are going to help you guys cut the crap in your own thinking, cut the crap in what you've absorbed from around the traps, and get more certain in your ability to help more people through chiropractic. So let's cut the crap and get into it, hey?
Let's cut the crap. You're full of it today. You're very articulate. What's going on? Have you had 15 coffees?
Yeah, so if you're in single digits, you're not really trying, are you?
If you have too many of those, you will be doing more than cutting the crap. You actually going
Yep.
to it. So.
Well, yeah, I think there'll be a different version of crap, explosive. But anyway, maybe too much detail for a podcast. All right. So we've been through our first couple of episodes where we, I guess, laid a bit of a framework for how people can start to increase their certainty around kind of getting clearer about what they believe and how they might sort of get information from the clinical interaction with people around that. I thought it might be useful today, or we thought it might be useful. I don't want to claim credit for all the ideas, but I know you like to. But anyway, perhaps like a bit of a case study or a description of what somebody that you've worked with in this sort of area, what their experience has been. So did you want to jump in first?
I can do, yeah. When you sort of asked me about maybe a case study of someone who's grown in their certainty, probably a standout one for me would be a chiropractor who had done our care plans course, our online care plans course, which we've spoken about that in the past. But he'd been in practice for 17 years, and as we were just starting sharing with him the material we sort of share, about the research and sort of getting people to remember it's important to tell people what they need as opposed to what they want, and how to sort of land those things.
Just to pause on that, I actually think that's a really important thing, because I think a lot of chiropractors, and you're a master at this, so I guess I want to set it up for you to sort of slam it home, but a lot of people don't necessarily have your natural assholery, and they dislike that sort of the potential confrontation of recommending stuff to somebody and then have that person reject it. And so there's this sort of inner dialogue that chiropractors will often have or this inner process that people will have where they'll almost need to, in their head, go, oh, look, this person told me that, they've got 4 kids and I saw their car and it doesn't look that great. And when I look at their clinical findings, they're in a bit of a mess. So I don't want to recommend X, I don't want to recommend that they need twice a week or 3 times a week or whatever you think they need, because I'm worried that they won't be able to afford it. So I'll either kind of not really recommend, I'll recommend something so vague that they can't say no to it. Like, well, so because there's a fair bit going on, you kind of need to come quite frequently early on. And then as you get better, you won't need to come in as often. Or they almost like say what less than what the person needs. So telling them what you think they want. So maybe, Craig, before you get into your story, I think it might be worthwhile having a Craig rant on
a Craig rant. Oh man! All right, so I'm just going to get myself comfortable. Just kick back there, Martin. This is one of my favourite subjects.
A few stretches.
Yeah, well, there goes all my notes of what I was going to talk about. It's just completely different to what I had set up. But anyway, it's all good. But this is actually a real passion project for me, in that I completely agree that a lot of chiropractors have a hard time telling a person what they actually need, and then they'll sort of more measuredly sort of say what they think they'll take on or they'll accept. And there's a lot of stuff in the background about this, like everything from the fear of rejection. What happens if I give them a care plan that they say no? What happens if they sort of say to me, where do you get the evidence for that? Like, what happens if they accuse me of trying to pay my mortgage off? Or all of these things come to mind, and I just can't help but come back to our core thing as a chiropractor, is that we're not here. Like, I hate to say it, I know you've gone through your arsehole stage. I'm well and truly owning my arsehole stage. But we're not actually here to be liked, right? We're here to help, and sometimes helping people means that you need to tell them the hard truth, something that someone has never told them before, often. And then delivering on that promise. And that's literally takes the chiropractor out of the equation. The thing that shits me, and if anyone wants to cut the crap when they're delivering a care plan, is get yourself out of the fucking way. Yeah. Honestly, that person needs what they need.
Yeah.
They don't need what you feel comfortable in expressing to them.
Absolutely.
And you actually making them the decision about what a person can and can't afford. Well, I'm going to let you know, unless you, on your initial patient, forms, unless you've got access to their stock portfolio, their tax return from the last year, what investments they have, how much mortgage they got on the place, what kind of car they drive, all of these things, then you really aren't using objective means of working that out. And I'm going to also let you know, Martin, you live in a really nice part of Melbourne, and your practice is really well situated. I'm going to let you know the people having money in the bank has no bearing about whether they put their money into health.
Yep.
Like that's just the most mind-boggling thing for me. Is it just because someone's got money in the bank doesn't mean that they value their health, that they're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's about, okay, what does this person need, and telling them that, and then being ready for the objections. And the thing that I suppose a lot of chiropractors don't have is, okay, what do I do? How do I handle when, not if, but when they have some objections around it? And we can even talk about that a bit more if you like too. But what do you say to that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really valuable point. I guess the key thing that I look at is aligned with what you're saying. Your job is to tell them what they need in ideal circumstances, and to give them space to make a decision about what best suits them. And one of the key things, that if you know that you have that tendency to want to undersell it, or sort of almost avoid that point of decision, then the way that you can sort of almost hold yourself accountable is, I need to tell this person what they need, and I need to give them something that's clear enough that they could say no to. So I think sometimes chiropractors either don't tell them exactly what they need, or they tell it in such vague terms that nobody could say yes or no to it, because you're really just asking them more or less, we're going to see what happens over this period of time, and using very qualitative rather than quantitative things of, we're going to see you more frequently at the beginning and less frequently further. And it's going to be, some period of time, and everybody's different. Whereas I think you actually have to have that clarity of, it needs to be this many times a week, and it needs to be for this many weeks, so that there is something tangible, and the measure of whether it's tangible or not is somebody could actually say no to it.
Well, even taking that further, I completely agree. It has to be so crystal clear that they can actually say it back to you or someone else what's going to be happening, because they're going to go home to their spouse, and if their spouse says, okay, what did the chiro say, and then they give a report back, well, he's going to see me a bit more frequently at the start, and then as I'm improving, he's going to decrease the frequency, and then the spouse says, but how many times are you going to see that? How much do we need to budget for this? And it's going to be a shit show at home, because it's all very vague, and that's not cool. As opposed to, what the chiro say to you? Well, look, it's going to take this long. It's going to be this amount of care needed, and I'm going to do a review along the way, and just to measure, and what's expected as this happens, and this is what the deal is. And then that's super clear. Everyone's super clear about what's going on. The spouse is happy-ish. knowing that
Yep.
it's at least crystal clear. They can budget for it if need do.
Yep.
And the guy who's under care, he's kind of like, well, this is what I need to sort of better myself. And at least there's going to be some measuring along the way that can check in to see if that's the appropriate course of care. So, like, it's not a hard thing to get, I think, but it is. It is actually a very hard thing for a lot of people.
I think it's just people come into chiropractic being people. They come in wanting to help, and often coupled with that is an aversion to people being unhappy or there being a point of conflict. So the story.
Well, actually, just if I can add just one little thing, like nuance to this concept, and this works actually quite well, and this happened in this story too, is often when we're doing reporter findings or delivering recommendations, a chiropractor has in their mind that they're sitting across the table from a person and they're saying and pointing to the person saying, hey, this is what you need. This is what you need, and blah, blah, blah. And that sort of can be very jarring for and scary for the chiropractor to deliver that. And it's also very jarring for the patient. Whereas if we actually communicate in a way to the patients where we're actually alongside them and we're sort of side by side, we're looking at their problem, which is over there, and we go, hey, look, this is, and basically making I'm going to say, make the tests and the x-rays the arseholes. And the health decisions they've made up until now, the arseholes and all that kind of, make them the arseholes and say, look, because of those arseholes over there, this is the kind of care that you would need based on those arseholes. All right. So if we work together, we can get rid of a lot of those arseholes, and we can, and it's a whole different point of view than going front on.
And I think you probably mean this in what you're saying, but I'll make it explicit as well. I teach chiropractors from a communication perspective that to do that, to be on their side, that comes in very powerfully with body language, where if you specifically have it, that you have, you're writing down what they need, or you have represented what they need on some tangible artifact, like a piece of paper or a report or whatever it is, and you stand so that you are standing or sitting side by side while you're looking at this thing, that aligns with that abstract idea of being on their side. You're on their side literally, and because of that power of 94% of communications non-verbal, it means that it structures the communication in a way that people get it, and you feel like I'm on this person's side, and takes away a lot of that drive towards softening down what the person needs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like, I remember I did a talk for, I learned something from a talk I did. How's this? Wow. I did a talk. It was for a men's shed. You've heard of men's shed? It's for the guys with mental health. And one of the things I found in the men's shed is effectively guys, particularly guys, communicate better when they're side by side, not making eye contact, and they're working on a project.
Yeah.
So if they're working, let's say they're doing some woodwork and blah blah blah, and one guy says to the other, so I went to the doctor the other day and I got the finger test, and then the other one not making eye contact. Oh, how'd that go? Oh yeah, I didn't find anything. Like having that conversation as opposed to having a beer at the pub, looking directly at the guy. Yeah. You wouldn't the guys won't necessarily share that kind of vulnerability in that case. So it's really fascinating. So I just found, I took that and applied it to what we do in the practice, and now you just made it sound like you've got all the research behind you too. So it's cool.
This is good, yeah. Different sources, but the same result. So the story, 17 years in practice.
Yeah, 17 years in practice. So what this guy had done, he had several associates with him, and what had happened over time is he, with all of his experience, he'd been quite a successful chiropractor, developed a really good reputation. But what had happened over that time, he surrounded himself by new graduates, And he found that he'd had something what we call care plan slide, which effectively where his care plans that he did originally that grew his practice and really helped his reputation helping people, really started to change with respect to the associates that are around him. So his care plans actually started looking more like what the associates, new graduates, would actually recommend. And then doing the course, we sort of highlighted the fact, okay, you need to tell them what they need as opposed to what they want. And here's the research, and here's what the latest available evidence suggests. And then, of course, that was actually different to what a new associate would typically recommend. And he's then got up in front of a class we did on inspiring referrals, and he stood up, and I just bloody wish we got this on video. And he stood up, having done care plans, the course. I realised I'd had this care plan slide, and so we changed that and implemented that, and we grew our practice by 30%. And I've gone, oh my God, got to get that on video, and the bastard won't do it. So, so this is my opportunity, right? So, but the key thing is what I love about that is he felt he could actually share what people need once again, and be more self-aware of the care plans that he was recommending. So that's my case study.
Excellent.
There you go. What's yours? Tell me yours. Tell me a story, Martin.
Mine's very similar. Like, I guess for me, the same sort of, the same idea of people who perhaps hadn't developed clarity around, or somebody who hadn't developed clarity around their approach to taking people through care in their office. And so this is a guy who'd been in practice for 5 or 6 years when he came to one of the certainty workshops that I used to do in person. And it's now an online program, but at this stage it was in person. And part of the process that we take people through is initially they do a certainty survey, which is essentially a self-diagnostic to say where you're certain and where you're not. And he was, like most chiropractors, very certain in the philosophy part of it, in terms of the body being self-healing, self-regulating, etc. We've spoken about it the last couple of calls. What we identified, though, is when he went through that exercise that we spoke about last week, where you kind of map out what in your testing tells you whether this person's spinal function or their level of subluxation is changing, improving. He didn't necessarily have that in place, but what it created for him was an experience in practice where he would go to a seminar like a DG or a Parker, or get together with a group of chiropractors, or a technique seminar, neurology seminar, whatever, and be super pumped and spizzed about chiropractic. Like, he was on fire going back into practice. And then he would, over a period of time, feel like everything just sort of got dull and grey and deflated, as the day-to-day experience of practice didn't match that vision that he had when he was in those seminars. So it would be stuff like, somebody would come in and say no to his recommendations, or somebody he thought got the big picture would drop out of care, or somebody would question something, or you'd have a reevaluation and somebody didn't feel like they were doing well, or whatever, and he would just find that this would beat him down. And he'd been through this for 5 or 6 years, and he didn't feel like he was really kind of getting anywhere in regard to that. And so practice was becoming more and more of the drag. He had a career before chiropractic and had come back to chiropractic, and he was really seriously contemplating, do I just pack it in and go back to what I'd been doing beforehand? Yeah. And had friends of his had done the certainty seminar and said, look, I reckon this might help you. He came along, did the exercises. During that workshop, discovered one thing, which was that he didn't have testing that told him independently of how people were feeling, whether they were improving or not. And so we just really plugged in 2 simple tests that he could do that would kind of build a framework around it, that he could then work out, look, how am I going to track this? How am I going to measure it, etc. And then the second part of it, which is kind of the exercise I'm going to get people to do, so I'll go through more details afterwards, was we got him to set some clinical rules, meaning what do you do and what don't you do? And so he was finding that there would be people who would come in and say, be super stressed, and he would be like, oh, shit, I know they're stressed, and stress triggers subluxations. So should I be kind of counsel? Do I need to talk through this? I've got this relationship with them. Do I need to talk to them about the challenges that they're having with their kids or their partner or work or whatever? Or is my job to just take care of the spine? But in that way, am I just allowing a known cause of subluxation to just be detracting from their role in care? And that lack of clarity around that was wearing. And, there were other situations that were similar around, people would sort of ask about exercises, and he would be like, all right, all right, I'm going to get everybody these stretches, but is it then, a treatment, and I'm giving people rehab exercise? So just a whole lot of areas where he didn't necessarily have clarity around what his role was. And so I set him up with a process, which I'll go through a little bit later today, about how you make clinical rules for yourself. And then he started to piece some of them together. And he found that combination of things meant that he got back into practice. And the first thing was that he found that he had that much more even high level of excitement about practice. He loved practice, and he didn't need that outside in top up from a seminar. But he also just found that because he had more certainty, because he had more clarity, that he had this sort of practice growth aspect to it as well, because people weren't sensing his lack of certainty in a circumstance and going away. So that's kind of the results that people typically expect if they work on that sort of difficult work of defining things better for themselves.
Well, it's just sort of taking stuff that's sort of vapor, and one day I think I'll get around to that, or they think they're aware of it until you have to write it down.
Yeah.
And then that's when things really change, right? So that's great. I'm so glad you took my tips.
Touche. I could feel one of them coming. It was just
look, I got to be consistent, if nothing else.
Yeah.
It's perfect. Good.
Perfect. All right. So if we sort of move on from there, we've done a little bit of a case study, and up until now, we've given people a few tips on what they should be doing to, I guess, sort of get that momentum with their certainty. What would be the next step if they followed us up till now?
Yeah, well, the next step for me is actually sort of a little bit flowing on from your case study, actually. So, so we sort of more from a point of view of a person who's certain knows their role and knows and sticks to their lane.
Yep.
And the way I kind of look at this, and maybe to sort of paint this picture out a little bit, is, like I remember going at RMIT, and I remember being taught how to use the ultrasound. And the indifferential. And God, if I had $1 every time I've used an indifferential over the last 25 years, I'll actually have no money at all because I don't have one. But the way in which I viewed my education from that point of view was not necessarily that I had to do this stuff.
Yep.
But I could understand the physiology involved, what its role is in the healing process, and refer people to get that stuff done where appropriate. Yeah. And that's how I would look at my education in regards to that. Now, because here's what I realized: I didn't want to get a bloody ultrasound machine in the practice. I didn't want to get interferential. There's other professions out there that really love that stuff, and who am I to stand in the way of them doing what they love, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So sticking to my role, and my role as a chiropractor is to is to adjust people, help people through chiropractic, maybe give some lifestyle advice here and there. But it doesn't necessarily, as I said, mean, as you were saying, I don't have to, if I go to the gym, right, but I don't have to be their gym fitness instructor for them to get the most out of their care as well. I've got a gym instructor who's particularly good at that, and so those people I can refer to. But so sort of identifying my role in helping people, and I would say I like to see chiropractors see themselves or identify themselves as trusted health professionals. Yeah. And to be a trusted health professional means you're the first port of call on their healthcare team, and they come to you, and that you either help them with your hands-on approach, or you direct them to what the next step is. And then so in many cases that's going to see another professional. So if I've got a person who is struggling from I'll see people who, as you were saying before, with stress. Stress can cause subluxation. So if I see a person coming into the practice and they're suffering the effects of stress, I'll make note of it. I'll actually just make note of it. I'll make comment of it. But if I can see it trending over time, and when we do a review, we're seeing they're getting this ceiling effect to their response, then it is completely appropriate for me at that point is to go a little bit further into detail and offer up some other solutions in conjunction with chiropractic care. And so that's how I would see myself. And I think personally, the people who I see most certain in practice are really clear about what they're good at, and clear about what they're not necessarily good at. But I would even go so far to add another level to that, because I'm going to teach you a little bit about ABC patients.
Yes.
All right. So now I may piss a few people off here, but let's just, in line of cutting the crap, let's just deal with it. Martin, would you agree that not everyone who comes into your practice is the perfect patient for you?
I would agree.
I'm so glad we're on the same page. And how I look at people and with my clients is we sort of identify that there's three types of people that come to a practice, and we call them A, B, and C grade. And A grade patients, well, they're the pin-up models that of patients. They pay on time, they turn up, they refer others, they wear deodorant, and they're and
pretty low standard for A in the West.
Well, well, that's having that shower once a week, whether they need it or not. That's the concept. They're a pleasure to have in the practice. They get you, and they refer people who are similarly set up that way. So I would say they're my ideal people.
Yep.
And then we've got the B graders. And so we've got A, we've got B. Now, B graders want to be A graders. They want to be those people, but their application is shit, right? So they say, yes, I'm going to do this program of care, but then they start missing a few and sliding, and maybe they drop out, and then they come back again, and they're all inspired again. And effectively what we're trying to do with those B graders is just always trying to help them get up to that A grade level. And, and then of course there's the third one.
Yeah.
And there's C grade. Now, what do you think C stands for, Martin?
Well, my mind goes to a place that I don't want to say on a podcast because we'll have to have an explicit language warning. But
well, yeah, not that one, but maybe crap patients.
Right? So you want to cut the crap? Touche.
Cut the crap. I was in line with the podcast, but anyway. So crap, and what does that mean? Well, that means their expectations of me. I've got nothing. I cannot deliver what they want to deliver. I remember an old guy coming in, and he was like 170. It must have been your class, Martin. But he had this shoulder issue, and he kept on banging on about his shoulder issue. And look, clearly the guy had subluxations and things. I'm looking at this guy, and he was just after literally someone to say, yes, it's a shoulder issue. Yeah. So I then said to this guy, you know what, I actually think it is a shoulder issue, and I'm going to refer you to a physio friend of ours up the road, where she's going to be able to do an assessment of that to sort of just to see what the best approach is. Does that sound okay? And I remember his shoulders, like he was all like razzed up, and his shoulders actually dropped. Yeah. And he's going, yes, that's exactly what I want, right? And so we took him out to the front. We sent him up with a physio, who's a lovely physio. But the funniest thing ever, the reason I did this is because I was never going to achieve what he wanted me to achieve.
Yeah.
And so by letting him go, he was actually really buzzed about someone sort of taking note and referring him on. We didn't charge for the visit. I was like, what are we going to do? And then I also saw the shoulders of my CAs drop as they realised that they weren't going to have to deal with this gentleman. And then I could only imagine that the physio was pretty excited to get a patient from the chiropractor down the road. And the funniest thing that ever happened was this guy started referring everyone in. And right, and I'm not even kidding you. 5 or 6 people came in, and they'd come in and say, "Bill sent me in," and I go, "What did Bill tell you? We've never actually adjusted Bill." And this is the going back to that trusted health professional. Bill would say, "If Craig can't help you, he'll find someone who can."
Yeah,
and that is a good reputation to have.
Definitely.
So we love those C graders outside of the practice.
Indeed, remotely. So one of the things that I think you spoke to me as you were talking there is I think there's a central truth. If you want to have a practice that you love going to and people love coming to, it's a relationship. So yes, there's a clinical aspect to it, but there's also an interpersonal relationship that is centered on shared values. And part of those shared values are around what they want from the service and what the service and the alignment of that with the service that you provide. So if you're looking at, if both parties are coming into a relationship wanting slightly different things, it's kind of pointless keeping that relationship. They are probably wanting things that are better served by somebody else. And so, they get a better result elsewhere, and you get more capacity to look after somebody else who better is an A or a B in your parlance. So, I think there is that thing of just having the confidence, having the certainty, having the big enough vision to go, there are enough people who want and need what I provide, and I don't need to hold on to everybody, that there are certain relationships that you're just better off for them and for you, pointing them in the right direction.
And one of the things I sort of see and I observe in our practice and clients as well is that when you let go of these people, and when I say let go, I mean loving them, serving them out of the practice. What actually happens is it opens up about 3 to 4 times more A or B grade people to come in. Because the old 80-20 rule, 20% of the people you see take up 80% of your mental energy or what that kind of thing. Knowing that you just don't have to deal with someone who has unrealistic expectations opens you up to people who actually have realistic expectations. So it's a win all around. So what is your next step?
Okay, can I ask one more question about yours? So if part of it is I'm going to identify these people who just, it's not a good alignment for any of the reasons that we spoke above. It feels to me like you're loving them from afar, loving them remotely. There were a few steps that sounded like really good practice to me, and I just want to make sure that I'm getting it all, which was you have a conversation with them and just explain what you think is going on and why you think somebody else might be a better fit, but you're giving them a tangible next step. Is that right? Rather than, I would imagine, just saying to somebody, look, I don't think I'm the right person for you, doesn't feel as caring as, I actually think this person is a better person for you. Is that sort of the energy you're coming at it with?
No, we definitely wouldn't just leave it to go and see someone about your feet. Like it's just not, it's not serving them enough. So that's why I say, like, loving them out of the practice, serving them outside of your own practice, and when you've been in practice for a while, I'm sure in your area you've got a hub of professionals that you've worked amicably with, and I'm sure there's probably other people, not chiropractors particularly, but other professions who you've probably they've not been doing you the best service and maybe even bad mouthing you, right? So you wouldn't necessarily work with those guys.
No.
But you want to be working and putting together a group of health professionals where if you referred someone to them, you know what the experience is going to be when they get there. And more importantly, that they're going to tell the patient who they're serving is, how good is that Martin Harvey? Like such a good chiropractor, but I'm so glad you're here. Let me see what we can do. That's the experience. I see other chiropractors, particularly. Let's say someone's an absolute pain in the ass, right? And we all get them. And what I mean by pain in the ass is just off the charts. Just maybe they're an over talker, and they've just got no idea about what services you provide and have these crazy, unrealistic expectations. So I would actually still recommend them going to see a good professional, whoever that is, rather
Yeah,
than the guy that I don't like on the other
yeah,
side of the road, because that's just going to even ingrain that
yeah.
anti whatever even more. I want to support them. So anyway, that's just me
Yeah.
blathering on.
No, actually, I think it's an important distinction. And I think it's part of we spoke last time about a growth mindset. And a growth mindset, just by revision, is the idea that change is possible and that we grow through effort and we go through overcoming challenges. And I think sometimes chiropractors have a growth mindset for themselves and then not a growth mindset for people who are coming in. So you have somebody who's coming in who's being challenging for you, and maybe your assessment is that they have unrealistic expectations, or they have expectations that aren't in line with our approach, or whatever it is. I think it essentially speaks to a lack of belief in their potential for growth. If you go, this person is A, and you label them in some fixed way, that they can't have the capacity for growth. So I'll only send them to somebody who, whereas I look at it, I go, well, maybe I haven't had the ability to give a framework for their expectations that works, but I want to refer them to another professional who I would want to go and see, and they may have the insight or the communication approach or the rapport building or whatever it is to help this person, unlock that capacity for growth and change. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So now I guess we're very much aligned in terms of focus here, where I'm saying, yeah, you want to be very, very clear on what your lane is. And specifically in the context of what we've spoken about, I talk about first step, get your philosophy in place and clarity around what you believe there. And then we're working at this level of a paradigm. First step of the paradigm was that model of subluxation. Then do I have tests that tell me that somebody is improving in this level of spinal function, reducing their level of subluxation, so that I can tell independently of how they feel whether they're improving with my approach to care. I would then add in, there'd be another step that I'd have people do, which is, and the same thing on a visit to visit basis, because one of the main things that I think throws chiropractors off is the idea of, when have I done enough on this visit? So if I've done 2 adjustments, and then I should know, yes, this person has had the result that is meaningful. I feel like sometimes chiropractors, without a clarity of that endpoint, then end up going, well, I better give them a stretch, or I better give them a massage, or I better talk to them a lot, or I better do all these other things that aren't potentially adding anything to it, but it's papering over your lack of certainty in terms of the value of what you're delivering. So that would be the next step. And coupled with that, almost an extension of that, I want people to do the thinking that you described around what you do in what is your job and what isn't your job. So by way of sort of a story, if somebody came in to see you and they said, look, come in to see you, what's prompted me to come in is, over time, I'm just starting to notice that my neck's getting stiffer and more painful, started to get a few sort of headaches that feel like a tight band around my head. On further questioning, you sort of find out that, they're just energy level isn't as good, it's not sleeping as well, a few things like that. I feel like most chiropractors would look at that kind of initial history and go, wow, if I can do an assessment on this person, work out where they're subluxated, get a bit of an idea of, I can probably help them with what they came for, the headaches and the stiff neck. And there's also a potential, if I restore afferent input into their nervous system, that they're going to potentially feel better than they have in ways that they hadn't necessarily connected with chiropractic. And it's likely to impact things that are important to them in terms of their work or their social life or their family relationships. Like, this person I can almost certainly help.
Yep.
Similarly, if somebody presented to you and said, I've just developed the worst headache that I've ever had in my life, my face is starting to droop and I'm slurring my words and I can't raise my right arm, you can also know that that person, while they might benefit from chiropractic care down the line, they're probably having a stroke and you need to refer them, and they're not your job right now. They need some emergency care. And so you can be certain that something is your job and certain that something isn't your job. Often the grayness, that you lose certainty where things are grey. And things like that are things like extremity issues. So are shoulder problems your job or aren't they? And if they are sometimes and they're not sometimes, what are your rules around how you take somebody on in that regard? And in advance, who do you refer to given certain findings? So if somebody, as an example, if somebody has a subluxated shoulder and you use an extremity analysis and you adjust them, that's one thing. There's also the potential that if they then have like more embedded dysfunction in their rotator cuff, who do you refer to, who do you work with? So the more clarity you have around that, the more certainty you can have. Because where things go ugly is, yeah, I can fix shoulders as well as I can do anything else. And then do you then take on this complex rehab of somebody who's got a partially torn supraspinatus with some sort of bursitis and then, the impingement and all the complexity there, or not? It's just, it can be your job or it can't be your job. And so areas that I look at there that can be certainty drains, as I said, extremities, cranials is another area. It can be your job or it can not be your job, but you just want to be clear about when it is and when it isn't, who you check them and who you don't. Muscle tension is a really common one. There'll be some people who will look at it and say, look, as a part of subluxation, there will be changes in motor output into the surrounding muscles. And so it's actually a normal adaptive response. And my job is to clear the subluxation, and then the body does what it does with the muscle tension. Tempering that, though, if somebody has chronic subluxation and they've developed fibrosis there, is there an argument that they might need something else as well as an adjustment to work through that? And so being clear about what the indicators for that and is it your job or is that something that you recommend somebody else? It's not like a right or wrong answer, but the clearer you are on your approach, the more certain you are, and the earlier you're going to pick up people who might need another intervention as well as what you provide. We mentioned psychological stress. So psychological stress, emotional problems, those sort of things. How do you know that they're potentially an issue, and what are the resources? How do you discuss it with people? At what point in their care? All of those things, the more certain you are in how you want to approach it, the more certainty you're going to retain. Inflammation. So somebody comes in to see you and they are acutely uncomfortable. Is that a healthy thing? Is that a bad thing? Do they need an ice pack? Do they need curcumin or a Metagenics product? Or do you recommend in certain circumstances that people should be going and getting Voltaren? Like what's the kind of framework around that? And a couple of others that I would say that it would be valuable for people to just sit down and do the thinking around, how do I think about this, and who do I refer to, or what are my lines in the sand around when I raise it as an issue, would be rehab exercise. So do you give people a comprehensive, people who've got chronic subluxation or a disc prolapse or whatever, the research suggests that having a rehabilitative approach may benefit them. Do you prescribe it, like these are the specific exercises, or do you say, no, this is actually somebody else's area of expertise? Or do you use one of those sort of online PhysiTrack or web exercises or those sort of things so that you get an external expertise in that regard? So not that there's a right or wrong answer, but you just want to be clear what it is.
Absolutely.
And the last one would be that idea of sort of overall lifestyle. So do you individually talk to people about the sort of strategies that they should do in terms of eat well, move well, think well, to borrow a James Chestnutism? Or do you sort of generically say these are things that will impact your global health and impact your response to our care? Here are resources for you to help yourself. So basically, it's an ongoing process. So I mentioned earlier that the guy who'd done my certainty workshop had been trying to get clear on these things. He got back in touch with me 6 months after he'd done the course, and he was only halfway through that sort of dot point list that I went through there, but was finding that, yeah, this is a process of, as I get clearer in my thinking, I'm able to be much more certain in what I'm recommending to people and where the lines are on what is my job and what isn't.
Yep, I agree. And if I may sort of add just a slightly, like a little part to that too, because obviously this is involving other professions. This is involving actually working with physios or masseurs or acupuncturists or podiatrists and blah, 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 blah. Lots of different people. And yet at the same time, I hear chiropractors always saying, how do I get more new patients? How do I get more new patients? How do I? And so, honest to God, this is the best way of getting quality referrals you'll ever come across. And it just takes you getting out of your damn practice and going to meet people. Now, here's how I would do it. Is you ask your patients, who's the best masseur you know? Who do you see? Who do you see? Who do you see? And if there's a person comes up all the time that they're consistently, patients are saying, well, this so and so is or Betty is the go-to masseur in the local area, then that's the first person I'm going to go to. And I'm going to go and meet Betty. Betty, can I come and meet you? I've got 3 patients that come and see you. They rave about you. I want to understand more about what is the services you provide. If I refer people to you, what can they expect? What are your fees? What sort of information do you need from me to help? Blah blah blah, right? And that is literally the conversation you have. And then, of course, as we all know, the law of reciprocation says that Betty will then ask me, well, what do you do?
Yeah.
And then I've got to be answered, and then I get to have a chance of expressing what we do, and of course dropping about 100 cards with Betty. But that's but it's different from me going into Betty and say, can you please come and can you refer to me? It's about saying, hey, I've heard good feedback. I think we're something we could work together. Tell me more about your business, and so we can actually work together on these people, and then just out of that relationship comes.
Look at that. You cut the crap and you put your practice on the map. Love it. Actually, that's the majority of what I did to build my practice, was that kind of informal networking of looking for who are the people that the people who are coming to see me. I would have a conversation around who's their personal trainer, who's their massage therapist, who's their dentist, who's their whatever. Who's their podiatrist, and then you get in touch with that person and say, look, this person's I've seen this person who you're also seeing, they rave about you. I'll give you an update on what I'm doing. And they spoke really highly. And then, as you say, look at getting them to map out who they take care of and how you could work together. And it's a phenomenal way of serving people better and also creating a mutually beneficial referral relationship with people who are also those high-level professionals in your community. So,
absolutely. Get out there, people.
Indeed. All right. So I feel like we've put a really important piece of the puzzle in place. So we're, I guess, getting down to more of the brass tacks here of putting how you proceduralize the conceptual stuff that we've spoken about to actually start getting this abstract idea is concrete. When this happens, when X happens, I do Y, so that then we're creating an experience for people in their practice, which is a better clinical experience for them, and also allows us that certainty around when do I do different things, and when are people in and when are people out, or when are people in and also seeing somebody else for almost, I guess, a co-management approach to care. So really important way that we've cut a heap of crap around people's thinking of their role in people's care.
Easy.
Excellent. All right, mate. Well, that was a solid one. I appreciated the repartee, the bouncing ideas off there, and look forward to chatting again next week.
Absolutely.